Do you hear that, Rome? Can by no means partake in these assemblies. Pretty soon, there's going to be nobody left in this town to tap the brakes.
Yeah.
And that's, you sense that at this synod today. Now, thankfully, the men and women that are running this thing, they're not powerhouses. They don't have huge followings. They really don't. They don't have the gravitas, I don't think, to sustain this long term, but they can make one hell of a mess between now and whenever it all goes up in smoke. So today, for example, at the press conference, the Vatican press conference, we got to sit at the feet of Father Timothy Radcliffe, the Dominican, who's been strong on homosexuality, who's agreed with the German bishops that divorced and remarried people should have access to the sacraments. And, you listen to this guy talk, and it's just, on the one hand, we've talked about all the slogans. We got a journey. What are they all? I'm losing track.
Oh, well, his favorite was being church.
Being church.
We're going to learn to be church.
Learn to be church.
It's a synod that gathers to see how we can be church.
And again, he was so excited by the fact that they're learning to listen at this synod.
We're learning how to take decisions together, how to listen to each other.
And this is where you just, after a while, you want to put your fist through a wall. This man's been a priest for, 40 years? They had a nun up there who's been a nun for 50 years. She's the head of a convent right outside of Milan. And they actually, with a straight face, say that when they came to this synod this month, they began to learn how to listen.
What were they doing before, do you think?
What were they doing before? A nun running a convent out on the peripheries of Milan, where she's dealing with Muslims, she's dealing with poor people, she's dealing with atheists, she's dealing with every sort of person in the world. And yet you come here and you're expected to start adopting the narrative and the lines. They're literally given lines at these breakout sessions. In fact, they're told before they go into their little tables, little circular small groups they call them, they're told what they can and can't talk about. So all this palaver about how they all get along so beautifully and no one's afraid to say anything and isn't it great? Well, what they're not telling us is that to begin with, when they first arrived in Rome, they were told what they can and can't talk about. So they start talking about being church and listening for the first time. And I find that really offensive, even as a traditional Catholic, that they sit there and pretend like nobody in the church, no priest, no bishop, no nuns, for 50 years had any idea how to listen to people. This is a pretty basic skill for someone who's in service, spiritual, religious service. Listen. Shut up and listen. So this is where you get to the point where you say, there's no way this is genuine. This whole synod is so disingenuous that it makes you nauseous. Because there's no way grown adults could actually be serious when they say they came here and learned how to listen.
Well, what about the fact that right off the bat it's a very elitist sort of meeting?
Of course, it's extremely elitist. As
Invitation only.
Invitation only. There are no
less
parish
than 1%.
pastors. Yeah, parish priests here. No pastors here. Why not? We talked about that a few days ago. The people who actually are doing all the listening, the lion's share of the listening, aren't here.
And the only thing that they're really excited to tell you about is how much fun they themselves are having in their own little experience and their journey.
Well,
and all
you
that kind of
use the word elitist.
Any part of that.
Even as members of the press, we've never been, as a member of the press, I've never been so isolated from what's actually going on. They started this whole thing off by saying, don't share anything with the press. Be very, very guarded in what you say to the press. So it's elitism on steroids. Yet they claim to be going on to the peripheries. In what sense? They're not telling us what our own church actually teaches about anything. And this should be so offensive on several levels. Dogmatically, doctrinally, it should be offensive, but also just the idea of making fools of everybody. Today we saw in the press hall, I think, what you could actually call a hostile press. The press was pushing back hard today. One reporter actually said, you guys got a talk shop going here. You've been 3 weeks, 4 weeks at this? It's like a talk shop. What are you actually going to do?
Anything practical?
Anything practical? Well, we're going to do more synodal listening, and we're going to establish this synodal journey.
Being so happy that nobody's, being violent towards each other.
Right.
At these
Right. Where is this happening where people, you meet somebody who you disagree with and it ends up in fisticuffs? So what are they talking about? We were so glad nobody beat anybody up at the synod today. They're also, accommodating and listening. So that's when you start realizing that we've realized it for a long time, but it's really obvious that they're just making stuff up.
Well, and what's completely absent at this? It would be any talk of doctrine.
Yeah.
Any sort of real defined teaching of the church.
Right.
But that's for a reason, of course.
Right. The reason there's no talk of doctrine, they can't speak of doctrine, they can't speak of defined dogmas of the church, because they are in violation of every defined dogma of the church when it comes to things like extra ecclesia nulla salus. You may not like that dogma of the church. That's a defined dogma of the church. Outside the church, there is no salvation. Unless you're a subject of the Roman pontiff, you cannot be saved, right? This stuff, these are dogmas that they're glossing over. And so whenever they get in trouble, and today, as I say, it was fairly hostile, 2 or 3 questions, 4 questions, we're pretty right in their face, because the reporters are getting sick of this, the people are getting sick of it, some of the Synod Fathers are getting tired of it, because it's kindergarten finger-painting nonsense, right? So the only recourse that they have then to do is they appeal to Vatican II. Or they may appeal to it unum sint, John Paul or something, but it's always very recent. They don't appeal to anything in the past. And the reason for that is because what they're doing here this week is absolutely condemned by the Catholic Church. It's been absolutely condemned. In no uncertain times, again and again and again.
By
it's
name?
been condemned by name. So, for example, we talk about Mortalium Animos of Pius XI. I think if I said something about Mortalium Animos in the Synod press hall today, their heads would have spun around like that kid in The Exorcist, projectile vomit and smoke out the ears, because you can't bring that up. But let me just take a little look. I mean, I'm sure most of our readers and viewers are very familiar with Mortalium Animos, 1928, Pope Pius XI, on the subject of religious unity. Remember, everything here today is about unity, to the point now where they're saying unity is really the only thing that matters. We talked about this yesterday. We are unified by our baptism, and that's the most important thing, and nothing else matters. So, for example, they have Protestants here. Well, most Protestant denominations reject 4 out of the 7 sacraments. Sacraments are instituted by Jesus Christ to give grace. They're the main channels of grace. They're the main channels of salvation. So we're dialoguing here with people who reject 4 out of 7 of the ones that Christ gave us, including, of course, the Eucharist. So the Eucharist itself then becomes apparently not a big deal. You don't think it's Jesus in the bread and wine? Fine, we do. It doesn't matter. We're baptized.
Eucharist, it's communion.
It's communion, because that's all that matters. Right. And they've made that really clear. Francis has made that clear over the years. A communion is now something different. It's not the bread of life that they're actually talking about. It's the communion. It's bringing everyone together. It's the journey, bringing divorced and remarried back in, bring the gay people back in, and all this stuff. So Mortalium Animos already condemns exactly what's happening. I'll just touch through a bit of it. It has condemned the early ecumenical movement and confirmed that the unique church founded by Jesus Christ is the Catholic Church. This is what I asked Cardinal Cook yesterday. Do you still have to be Catholic? Are we still inviting anyone to be Catholic? Well, of course they're not. Absolutely they're not. That's not the point. So what you do is you actually have a synod that's solidifying everyone who's outside the Catholic Church and telling them it's just fine to stay outside the Catholic Church. We love you. We worship the same God. Please come to our functions. We're all going to get along great. That's synodality. Not one mention about the need to become a Catholic. So when you have mass defection from the Catholic Church right now, it's not surprising, because the hierarchy, the leadership of the church, doesn't care if you're Catholic or not. So of course most people are like, okay, well, if I don't have to be a Catholic to save my soul, I'm not going to stick around, especially not for the Novus Ordo experimental, the Mr. Rogers liturgy, and all the rest. So let me just get into this so people can really see. Mortalium Animos, go ahead and look it up, read it, 1928, Pope Pius XI. It was an explanation of Catholic non-participation. It was forbidding participation in this kind of thing. In this case, in 1927, they were talking about the Lausanne Conference in Geneva. The Pope, Pius XI, infallibly forbade Catholic participation in a movement that he called pan-Christian. That's exactly what we're seeing here. Pan-Christian. Everybody's united by their... and that's all that matters.
Pope Francis has strongly developed this idea of this exchange of gifts, which comes from John Paul II, and he went even further. we can discover in other Christians what the Holy Spirit has given them for us. So this willingness to listen to the other churches on the part of the Catholic Church is welcomed by Christians from the other denominations today.
The reasons he condemns this, Pius XI. The postulates of the Union denied that the Church of Christ already visibly exists in the world and affirmed that it must be brought into existence. They implied that union can be achieved without unity of doctrine. We've seen that over here in spades. Doctrine has nothing to do with this. That's why they keep using this word walking and journeying and pathway. It's just the process of sticking together. There is no guide. There is no one true church. Yeah. Okay. So the conference in 1927 inferred that the Catholic Church is not the Church of Christ, but one of many communities in his church. That's exactly what we hear today, including the Orthodox and everybody else. It condemned the postulates involved relativism in doctrine, the conference in 27. That's exactly what this one does. Modernism in theology. This place is stinking, this synod, stinking with neo-modernism and modernism and folks that don't even know what modernism is because they took it with their mother's blood and breast milk and that's all they know. And the indifference of ecclesiology. Any meeting or association or movement based on such principles, says Pope Pius XI in an encyclical letter in 1928, any meeting based on such principles would contradict the entire faith of the Church, so that no Catholic could in logic take part in them. Do you see what I'm saying? They forbade Catholics to take part in any meetings like this one. They've been praying, they've been bragging about how they've invited all the churches of Rome to come and pray together. This is what Pius XI called pan-Christian prayer services, and he said Catholics are forbidden to take part in those. This encyclical, couldn't have been more clear. It's on fostering true Christian unity. Here's just a couple little quotes from Mortalium Animos. There is but one way in which unity of Christians may be fostered, and that is by furthering the return to the one true Church of Christ of those who are separated from it. Far from that one true church, they have in the past fallen away. The one Church of Christ is visible to all and will remain. I think I'm probably the only one that spoke these words, and we're sitting here in Rome right now, in about 60 years. This is what defined this church. This idea of the supremacism of the church Christ founded, this is what caused everything we see around us to be built in the first place. And yet it's been totally abandoned by this synod, by the spirit of Vatican II, the new evangelization, and now synodality. He says about these meetings, they assert their readiness to treat with the Church of Rome, but on equal terms, as equals with an equal. Again, it's all we've seen all week long. They would do so only on condition, they'll meet these things only on the condition that no pact into which they might enter should compel them to retract those opinions which still keep them outside the one fold of Jesus Christ's church. So in other words, we're not going to change anything, which is what they've been saying all week, and of course that's perfectly acceptable to the Synod Fathers and Mothers. This being so, says Pius XI, it is clear that the Apostolic See can by no means take part in these assemblies. Do you hear that, Rome? Can by no means partake in these assemblies. Nor is it in any way lawful for Catholics to give to such enterprises their encouragement or support. If they did so, they would be giving countenance to a false Christianity quite alien to the one true Church of Jesus Christ. That is why they can't talk about anything that happened at the Synod. That's why they can't say one word about anything that happened for 1,965 years up until the close of the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council marks the omega point. This is the birth. This is where it all started. The Catholic Church starts there. Because anybody, if you want to look at the fathers of the church, doctors of the church, Robert Bellarmine, you go all the way down the line, what they thought of a synod on synodality like this, they condemned it to the deepest bowels of hell. So this synod simply cannot mention it. Can't mention the past, the teachings, the infallible, dogmatic teachings of the past. And that's why they don't.
So the Vatican II church is the synodal church.
Yeah.
It just grew up now.
Yeah.
I learned a new word.
Which is something that, as traditional Catholics we've been talking about all along. It's not just the Latin Mass. It's not just the Latin Mass. They are depriving, right now, they're working synodally throughout the whole world to deprive people of the truth, to not give them the truth of the one true church founded by Jesus Christ. So what is that? That's a gross violation of charity. And traditional Catholicism has always been about the divine commission of our Lord. Go out and baptize all nations, convert all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Ghost. Become part of the one true church of Jesus Christ. You simply can't have any meaningful dialogue, for example, if I think that the Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ under the appearances of bread and wine, and you think it's a symbol and it's kind of nice, but it certainly is not Jesus Christ. How do you and I journey together for any length of time? We can be charitable towards one another, but we don't belong to the same religion, and we can't pretend that we do. We're as different as I am from a Muslim or as I am from a Jew. That doesn't mean you hate Muslims, you hate Jews, you hate Protestants, but you can't pretend like it's all the same and that unity is the only thing that matters. Charity matters. Charity matters, yeah. You be charitable to your neighbor who's a Jew or who is a Muslim, not a Catholic. And this is the beautiful thing about the Catholic Church. For 2,000 years, she was charitable. She was the most charitable institution of the world. She was the least racist institution in the world. You have Catholics, popes, cardinals of all colors, right? You have the church in every country of the world. Everybody is welcome. Everyone's always been welcome. You can see that by the missionary activities all over the world. Hospitals, which were invented by the Catholic Church, by the way, look it up. Orphanages, soup kitchens, schools, all over the world. By the Catholic Church, which truly accompanied people by telling them the truth. So this is nonsense, what they're doing here. And it's highly insulting to all the great saints, to all the great missionaries, great popes, virgins, martyrs who came in the past, who knew very well how to listen to people and how to be charitable to people, and how to lovingly encourage people to come into the fold of Jesus Christ. And to suggest otherwise, as we just saw today with Father Radcliffe and this nun, to suggest otherwise, to pretend like no Catholic ever knew how to listen until 2023 in this godforsaken town of Rome, is the biggest insult to the patrimony and to the historical legacy of the Catholic Church that I could even think of. That nobody knew how to listen until now. This is absolutely offensive to pious ears. It's offensive to the Catholic heart. So we're here trying to cover this thing, trying to be fair, trying to encourage those who are resisting. But the reality is, why is it just Bishop Schneider and just Cardinal Berg and Cardinal Sarah and a couple of others who are Cardinal Zen, who are standing up?
Do you think that really is the only one?
I don't. That's a good question. That those are the only ones. No. I think we're going to see a lot more of those, and the reason I think we're going to see more is because of what we've been seeing this week. A synodal fatigue setting in with guys who are saying, okay, bishops even a couple cardinals, who are saying, okay, this is all BS. I'm sorry, forgive my French, but you can see it written on their faces. Mm-hmm. This is nonsense. This is finger painting and Crayolas and songs for children, play acting for children. So I think that's the silver lining of the whole thing, that as we get closer and deeper into this thing, now they came pretty close with this synod. We're going to see tomorrow or the next day they're going to have their final document. 40 pages long, God help us.
It won't say a thing.
Probably won't say much, but I think what we saw, and we talked about this last night, you see such pushback from people who are kind of playing along with this whole Spirit of Vatican II thing, and now they're seeing where it's ending up. And you know where it's ending up? It's ending up in nowhere land. Absolutely nowhere. Less than 1% of the world's Catholics are contributing to this, are involved with this synod. They simply don't care. Nobody cares. And you can sense that in the press hall. There was a lady today, one of the synod mothers, who said one of the things they discussed this morning was when they come back to convene the synod in 2024, could we please make it 3 weeks instead of 4, because this son of a gun is long.
Really? But they're getting along so well.
They're getting along
they're
great.
Having so much fun.
They're getting along
together.
great. Yeah, so it's the traditional Catholic part of all this is fascinating because I think a lot of people, and again, we met a lot of people here so far, people who even 5 years ago would not have been too friendly to the remnant and all that. Complete 180 because of what's going on here. So I always like to encourage people, if you're keeping the faith and your priest is keeping the faith and some bishops like Bishop Schneider are keeping the faith, take great consolation in that, because that's the thing that lasted 2,000 years. That's the thing that started with 12 apostles, just 12. You know what I mean? And spread throughout the entire world. So if there's just a few of us, I mean, it's so discouraging, there's only a few, it doesn't matter. There were only 12 when it started out. So just keep that faith, study the faith, learn the faith, and it's going to spread throughout the whole world again, because I can guarantee you one thing: the nonsense going on here has zero sustainability. It's not going to last. It's almost like everybody here knows it. It can't sustain anything. It is beyond stupid. So I think that's the big takeaway from this whole thing, is the traditional Catholic position has been right, not only liturgically, but doctrinally, and holding on to the doctrines of the faith is the thing that's going to sustain and save the church. It's how God will save the church, through his people, through his faithful people. And we're just going to be a part of that. And all of a sudden, it's just gotten a lot easier, because nobody wants to be associated with Pollyanna and Mr. Rogers over here at the Synod. You know, they really, really don't. So I think it's gotten a lot easier to become a serious Catholic and just to be committed to that. So.